Hello, this is my second video uh, on the subject of the death of the West. In this video, I'm going to talk about two scriptures, two chapters, one from Revelation, I believe, chapter 15, if I'm not mistaken, and from the second chapter of the book of Daniel. First, we're going to talk about 17, chapter 17, not 15. Let me start reading. Come here, and I will show you the judgment of the great harlot who sits on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth committed acts of immorality, and those who dwell on the earth, who were made drunk with the wine of her immorality. And he carried me away in the spirit into a wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast full of blasphemous names, having 7 heads and 10 horns. The woman was clothed in purple and scarlet, adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls, having in her hand harlots and the abominations of the earth. And I saw the woman drunk a gold cup full of abominations and unclean things of her immorality. And on her forehead was a name written, a mystery, Babylon the Great, mother of, with the blood of the saints and with the blood of witnesses of Jesus. When I saw her, I wondered greatly. And the angel said to me, why do you wonder? I will tell you the mystery of the woman and the beast that carries her, which has 7 heads and 10 horns. I have to use a mouse for this program. Just who is this harlot being spoken of here has been the subject of speculation throughout the centuries since John first published this in the 1st century. I believe that this harlot is the West. And we'll get into why it's a harlot and why this is critical. And also, we'll get into why she's called, where does it say it? Oh, that's right. Babylon the Great. I believe that she's called Babylon the Great from the book of Daniel in the 2nd chapter. So let me just go down here. Now, I believe that when it talks about Babylon, it's talking about the West. And the West consists of America, Western Europe, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, but it probably doesn't include Eastern Europe. And what characterizes the West is we're considered the first world. We have higher incomes than the rest of the world. We are freer than the rest of the world. We have governments that aren't corrupt. We live in nice homes. We have medical care for the most part. We have cars. We have nice cities and towns to live in, and we have the freedom to generally to do whatever we want, within reason, of course. This isn't true of the rest of the world. Most parts of the world, I mean, there's like nobody really talks about the second world, but we talk about the third world all the time. But basically, in the rest of the world, the people are far poorer. They live hand to mouth. In other words, uh, they go out and work, and then they pay for food, and then they eat it. Uh, they uh, they generally don't have their own cars unless they're using them for business. They don't own cars. They live in small apartments, or they live in um, some something that's only one step up from living in a tent or a cabin. Uh, they the governments are corrupt. The leaders steal everything that they live in kleptocracies. They have oppressive governments that are um, that 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 apply the law unequally. In other words, certain groups of people have more freedom than other groups. um, they're constantly fighting each other with, like, especially in Africa, but also in some parts of South America. Just a lot of wars, a lot of battles, small battles, regional battles, but a lot of them, and people get killed, and um, women are abused, and um, uh, uh, young men are forced into becoming a soldier. Uh, I mean, generally, the West is the place to live. That's where the rest of the world wants to come. They don't want to. I mean, if you're living in North Africa, you want to go um, north into Europe. You don't want to go, south into the southern part of Africa. You want to go north. If you're living in Mexico or uh, South America, you want to head north into the United States and Canada. Um, um, we do have it very good in the West. We uh, we don't have to worry about our police just arresting us and putting us in prison extrajudiciously, other than the occasional um, uh, uh, police brutality, like what we're experiencing right now as I'm making this video. There was a case of police brutality in Minneapolis. But other than that, generally the police are honest, and they're not corrupt, and you will get due process. You'll get a lawyer, you'll get a trial. All the facts will come out. This isn't true in other parts of the world. They'll put you in prison. They don't care what the facts are. They just oh, we caught him, but they don't really care if you did anything. So the West is a great place to live. Also, the other aspect of the West is that we are the market for the world's goods. Because we have money. We can afford to buy things. So yeah, the world sells us all our stuff. The United States has trade imbalances with virtually every country that we deal with. China, for example. I mean, you can't go to Walmart or Target without buying something made in China. I mean, almost everything in those stores is Chinese. We are their market. We are their customers. And let me just continue from verse 11 in Revelation 17. And the merchants of the earth weep and mourn over her, because no one buys their cargoes anymore, cargoes of gold and silver and precious stone and pearls and fine linen and purple and silk and scarlet and every kind of citron wood, every article of ivory and every article made from very costly wood, bronze, iron, and marble, and cinnamon, and spice, and incense, and perfume, and frankincense, and wine, olive oil, fine flour, wheat, cattle and sheep, cargoes of horses, chariots, slaves, and human lives. You may say, oh, well, human lives? The West doesn't have slavery. It's true, we outlawed it long before the rest of the world did. We pretty much outlawed slavery in the 19th century in the West. There are countries today in Africa where they still sell slaves. So, which brings me to the second chapter of the book of Daniel. I'm pretty familiar with this. In the second chapter of the book of Daniel, Nebuchadnezzar has a dream. And in the dream, he dreams about a statue. And he's troubled by the dream. So he asks the scientists of the day, which they called astrologers, he asked them to interpret the dream for him. They said, sure, just tell us what the dream is. And he says, no, you got to tell me what the dream is too. So he knows that they're not just making up the interpretation. Very wise move on Nebuchadnezzar's part. So Nebuchadnezzar eventually, Daniel comes to the call, the prophet Daniel. And Daniel was a Jew from Judea. He was one of the captives, and he was re-educated by Nebuchadnezzar's palace, and he knew the language, and he knew all the customs and everything. And because he also knew God, he was able to interpret the dream. And he told Nebuchadnezzar that he dreamt of a statue. The head was gold, the chest and arms were silver, the belly was bronze, and the legs were iron, and down by the feet they were a mixture of iron and clay. And a stone was thrown at the statue, and it hit it in the legs of iron and clay and knocked the statue over, and it fell to the ground and it was destroyed. And in its place, a mountain formed and filled the earth. Now, the way that it's traditionally interpreted, as a matter of fact, that Daniel does interpret the dream later to say that each part of the statue represented a different kingdom. And based on history, we know that the head of gold was Nebuchadnezzar. The chest and the arms of silver were the Medes and the Persians. The belly was bronze. We know that that was the Greeks. And the legs and feet of clay were Rome, the Roman Empire. This is commonly accepted. But what few people understand is that in this dream, what God is doing is he's telling Daniel that he's telling Daniel about the people that will make up the church. Now, I believe that the rock that is thrown at the legs of the statue is Jesus Christ, and that the mountain that grows up afterward is the church. And if you examine the countries involved, and of course the head of course is Nebuchadnezzar. But a lot of people don't realize is that Nebuchadnezzar was half Chaldean, and he was half, I believe it was Median. I think his mother was from Media. In other words, he was Persian, basically. That's what the arms represent, the Medes and the Persians. They worked together. They were from the same part of the world. They were from Iran, and that's where Nebuchadnezzar's mother came from, and he was half and half. But every other people group described in the statue came from Iran. Let me explain that. When Noah got onto the ark, he brought his 3 sons with him, Ham, Shem, and Japheth. And what happened was they brought their wives with them, and out of the children that Ham, Shem, and Japheth had grew 3 major people groups in the Middle East. Ham was the father of Canaan and the Canaanites. He was also the father of people that lived in Africa. He was the father of people that lived in Turkey. And there's the famous story about how Ham viewed his father's nakedness, and and Noah cursed the firstborn of Ham, who was Canaan, who also was Canaan became the Canaanites, and the Canaanites occupied the Palestine, or the land of Israel, and they were the ones that were displaced by the Israelis when during the Exodus, when they left Egypt. And then the Shem became the father of the Semites. And the Semites today are people that live in the Middle East, in Iraq, in Israel, of course. The Jews are Semitic. Saudi Arabia, Yemen, and North Africa, all across North Africa, and all the way down the East Africa, all the way down. Those people are all Semitic, and they were descended from Shem, who was the second brother of Noah, or the second son of Noah. The third son his name was Japheth, and Japheth basically became the father of people that lived in Iran, and also in Ukraine, and Greece, and also Rome and Europe, and also I forgot India as well. They're called they're called Indo-Europeans, and they all have languages that are related to each other. There's a huge language family that includes languages like Pashto in Afghanistan, and English, which I'm speaking to you now. Even the language of the original people that lived in Western Europe, they're the Celts, they spoke an Indo-European language. And from the head of gold, which consisted of half Semitic and half from half Indo-European, came the Indo-European empires, the Medes and the Persians. A lot of people don't realize this, but the Medes and the Persians, they conquered the known world. They had a huge empire, as big probably as the Greeks and the Romans. And then after the Medes and the Persians became the Greeks, and we all know about Alexander the Great, and he conquered the known world. And then after Alexander the Great came the Romans, who did the same thing. They just took over where the Greeks left off, and they conquered the known world. And they were in power when Jesus was born. And it was Christianity that was like the rock that hit the very fragile legs that consisted of clay and iron that were the bottom part of the statue. And it was Christianity that brought down the Roman Empire and turned it into the Holy Roman Empire, which was the middle part of Europe. In other words, the basis of Western Europe. And for over 1,000 years, the church, the Catholic Church, dominated Western Europe. The Eastern Roman Empire was eventually conquered by the Muslims. But the Western Roman Empire stood until the 19th century. And when the Protestant Reformation came and ended the dominance of the Catholic Church in Western Europe. But God blessed Western Europe because they were the place that the gospel came out of. A lot of people would like to focus on, all the bad things that happened in Western Europe. But the reality is that it was the most culturally and scientifically advanced area of the entire world. In the 20th century, in the first part of the 20th century, right before the World War I started, you have to understand, we were driving cars. They were driving cars in Western Europe. They had airplanes in Western Europe. They had ships built out of iron that were fueled by steam turbines, and they could go 30 miles an hour in the water. They had massive armies that no third world country could stand up against. They went throughout the whole world starting in the 15th or 16th century. They went throughout the whole world and accumulated vast empires in Africa and South America and in Asia. And no one could stand against them because they were organized. They were advanced, advanced weapons, advanced organization, and they also brought with them the gospel. And because of that, I believe that God blessed them. And now, here it is, the 21st century. And the West is rapidly getting rid of the gospel. And that's what's going to lead into my next video. Thank you very much.